Welcome to this week's episode, The Invisible Scorecard. In this episode, Jeff and Erin reimagine the vendor selection process to go beyond the pitch and even the RFP to get to something far more valuable: organizational alignment. If your to-do list has evolving needs, emerging tech, and upcoming conferences, this episode may be your secret weapon to securing those successful and long-term partnerships that can deliver the support you need and the relationship you want.
The executives who leave conferences with real signal are those ones that walked in with that invisible scorecard in mind, because they're already doing their evaluation without you even knowing it.
Highly Adaptive is a podcast where staffing and consulting leaders learn to outpace change. Hosted by Jeff Pelliccio and Erin MacKenzie, they'll cut through the noise to bring you practical moves you could use right now to grow, adapt, and lead. Conference season is here, and if you've been to one lately, you know what it feels like. Booth after booth, pitch after pitch, every vendor telling you that they're different, every deck looking a little bit like the last one. Here's the thing though, by the time you're seriously evaluating partners, most of them can do the job. The capability differences are marginal. So what are you actually deciding? Today, Erin and I are going to get into what sophisticated buyers are really evaluating and how the conference environment, used intentionally, gives you something that no RFP and no Zoom call ever can. So if you've got vendor conversations coming up, and most of you do, grab a coffee. This one's going to be for you.
Okay, so before we get into the framework, I have something to share that happened to me recently. And if you follow me on LinkedIn, you guys would have already seen this story, because it's kind of the whole reason we're actually having this conversation today. So I flew out to Louisville, Kentucky. I was in a vendor evaluation, final two, still in final two right now. And instead of back-to-back presentations, this client did something I've never experienced before. And I kind of chatted about it because they put both of us, both vendors, at the same dinner table. And it was amazing. There was no decks. We had no agenda. We didn't even know we were all going to be doing this together. It was truly just a conversation about where we started, why we do the work we do, what drives us. And it became one of the most revealing professional experiences I know I've ever had. It did different things. I'm still thinking about it. And it wasn't because it was uncomfortable, but because of what it kind of showed everyone in that room. And that's what we really want to unpack today, because we really got to tell our story. So I'm excited to jump in this, because Jeff, you and I were chatting and I'm like, Jeff, this deserves a podcast. This is something that most clients do not do. It was the first time I'd ever experienced it. I don't know if you have experience being in the same room with a vendor and just telling your story.
I've never heard anything like that in any of the vendor processes that I've been a part of. And I've also never invited anybody into a vendor process quite like that, where you create this moment of more of a human connection, where you get to see who that person is in order to make a decision. So I've never seen anything quite like that. But the thing that I find fascinating about that scenario is that if you attend conferences, this is something that either A, already happens and you don't know it, or B, something that you can use in your toolbox to make happen for a specific part of your evaluation. So I found it fascinating that you experienced this in the way that you did, but I also find it pretty exciting that it actually creates a new evaluator for buyers to use, which likely will get them a much stronger alignment with the partners that they select.
Completely, because it kind of removes all of the sales bullshit that goes with stuff. And it really allowed people to connect on that personal level where title didn't matter, who you worked for didn't matter. It was really about truly the relationship and the culture fit. And do we align with core values? Who are you as a person? Is this someone that I want to cultivate a relationship with for the longer term? So it was amazing what it did. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for different buyers to do this with conferences, as you're saying. Conference season is coming up. Why not? This can be a different game changer for how you select who you're going to move. I was going to say jump into bed with, but I don't know if that's like the right terminology. But you know who you want to partner with for the long term, but the ring on the finger. You know, I always have to throw it and take it to a different direction.
I mean, so I do often make the correlation between like dating, right? So like, you know, you're not going to the altar right away. You're usually going out for drinks, or you're usually, you're getting a coffee. You're doing something a little bit lighter than full-blown marriage. But I hear you. Yes. So I think in order for us to be able to make this a really meaningful episode, make this like tangible for people, why don't we first look at like the existing process? Yeah. So like, what does a typical vendor evaluation actually measure, and what does it miss? So I think if we start there, we could almost like Tarantino this, right? I don't know if it's a thing, right? But like we can kind of go through the process to then backfill into like how they can approach conferences.
No, that makes sense, because when I think about, oh God, I've been on many vendor evaluations through all of the different years, especially when I was on the sales side, and then switched even over to operations and client success, like still being a part of those vendor selections. And the typical evaluation, I mean, you submit your RFP. I'm thinking, well, let me put it from this. If I'm a buyer, I create all the questions for the RFP. From that, I submit it to all of the different vendors that I potentially want to work with, or I want to date. As you said, it's almost like, it's like not blind dating, but it's almost dating. It's like warm dating. So we go on the dates, you send it out, you read through everything from a buyer perspective, and then you select the ones that you want to kind of bring a little bit more to the table. You want to get to know them. You want to understand their product. Okay, their product, from what it sounds like on paper, looks really good. So it's like, I don't know, is this like Tinder? Is this like Tinder?
You're literally defining Tinder. You're literally defining Tinder.
Wait a second. This is kind of like, you read their profile, you understand, you see their picture. Yep. This case, you might go to their website.
Yeah, you see what the features are.
You're swiping left or swiping right.
That's it. You are basically, you're describing the Tinder experience, but on a professional level. So yes.
I love this. Okay.
So the question is, like, what are you putting out there that you're asking for, right? Because there is a certain portion of that as well. So as you said, from the buyer's perspective, you're listing out what it is that you need. Yeah. Oftentimes, like, I don't know how far we should go on this analogy, but oftentimes you're looking for very specific elements, but those things also need to be performed in concert.
Exactly.
Right? So it isn't just about the person being funny, because you also have other things that you need in that space. So it isn't just a matter of that software working to perform that task, or that partner, the solutions partner, who's going to advise on that piece, but it's kind of the collective of all of the moving parts, right? And let's be honest, like, people, it's easy to look at the good side of a brand or a service when they show up presenting their best self.
Yep.
And that's what you're measuring in those moments, right? Is you're measuring them at their best behavior with all of these sort of controlled conditions that are in place. What do they behave like when things fall apart? Or what do they behave like once you get past the introduction and now you're actually part of the onboarding, which, let's be honest, tends to fall into a different category from the person who's pitching or selling.
Yeah. So like, I mean, if you already are fast forwarding to the onboarding, we got to figure out, are they a right cultural fit? Are they a right core value fit? Are they the right fit for us? You got to kind of really look at that partner identification. You remove, because if you get them into the room and we've got them there, we've narrowed down our vendors, we know the technology is there, or whatever we're selecting, right? Whether it's technology, whether it's consulting partner, whatever it might be. We know that we've narrowed it down to our final selection group. It then really becomes, are they the right fit that we should build something together? Are they the right fit that we should partner together? Can they actually do this? So it becomes, how do we look at this more long-term, not in the immediate? And that, like, the RFP got you into the room. Now it's about kind of looking at who belongs at that table for the long run is where we got to look.
And I think that's the whole point of this, right? Is that oftentimes the RFP process or the classic selection process doesn't look at long term. I think oftentimes when we're searching for things, we're searching because we have a pain that we're trying to resolve, right? We have identified this gap and we need that resolved relatively quickly so that way we can continue down our path, we can continue hitting our numbers, we can continue hitting our goals. Like generally speaking, unless this is something of a much larger corporate initiative, sometimes those selections happen in this like very fine space where you're just trying to resolve this one particular problem. And I know that I've done that. Right? I've gone out to seek the solution for the one thing. So in that effort, you're not paying attention to long term. You're often not looking at the quote fit. You're looking at like, can they cure this pain? And so I think that really shines a beacon on like what exactly the purpose is of this conversation, right? It's understanding what because everybody's got a different vetting process, right? So we're simply providing like a potential lens into where certain gaps may exist for people. You now have to go back and evaluate your own process and be honest about it, right? Like, are you only evaluating the technical skills? Like, if you can make a selection based on your list of needs off of a landing page, then you're probably not digging deep enough.
No, I would 100% agree on that. I think that's true. If you're only looking at what's on paper or what's on a website, then you're not going deep enough as a buyer. I really think like executives need to have essentially, and I think a lot of them do, and a lot of them are doing it in different ways, but it's really like that invisible scorecard. It's about, if I put myself in a vendor position for a second, I've asked buyers about, hey, like, where are we in this process? And the buyer will say, hey, we're still evaluating right now. Well, what does that really mean? What does that evaluation mean? Well, generally, what it means is that invisible scorecard where they're now looking at all the different factors of, okay, well, you're apples to apples in comparison to another vendor. I'm going to look at, is this a trustworthy partner? As a buyer, I'm going to be looking, is this a trustworthy partner that I can actually work with and be able to look at, okay, if we're in conflict or if there's a problem that happens, which we all know that always happens across implementations or at some point in time, how are we going to actually resolve this together? Do they also align with, I said earlier, core values? Do they align with my core values of what we think is the most meaningful? What is their strategic, more long-term thought process? How are they looking at long-term, not just in the immediate? So I think this invisible scorecard is something that a lot of different executives should start playing in their actual selection. And if I'm a vendor, I need to start playing into that. I need to make sure that I'm also building that relationship because the relationship is going to help drive the outcome.
Absolutely. And, not only from the executive point of view, but also from that change maker point of view. If you understand the fundamentals of what the executive is looking for when they have moved from reducing risk to identifying partners, then you're going to be able to have a much more complete evaluation that I think will serve the needs of the organization as opposed to resolving the problem. And what's fascinating, like you had mentioned, like cultural alignment, culture fit, long-term thinking, like it is, I think that like you have to really consider what are those questions, because you're not going to say like, oh, well, what are your core values? And then evaluate whether or not your core values line up. Like that kind of doesn't make any sense. But if, let's say you're an organization that thrives on innovation, let's say you're an organization that really prioritizes evolution. Let's say that you're an organization that really puts a strong emphasis with your team as a culture to process improvement and the betterment of your services as they continue to evolve over time, then maybe what you're looking for on a vendor would be something like, tell me about, the things that were roadmapped last year. Tell me about the implementations that went into place. What do you have roadmapped for this year, right? If you have a better understanding of what their mindset is as to how they consider their product and how they consider their approach to the market, how they consider their service levels to the community, then that might give you that lens into, hey, maybe this other company is a part of like my quote tribe, or maybe we're really not very similar. And so now you can start to determine, like, is this a long-term relationship or is it a short-term relationship? Maybe this is just nothing more than grabbing coffee every once in a while, and maybe it doesn't get to the altar, so to speak. So
completely. And I think from like a buyer, like so when I was at this dinner, it was amazing. There was 10 of us and it was no sales conversation. It was no pitch deck. It was nothing. It truly was getting to know us from a personal level and really aligning, likely like internally. I'm sure this is what we were being measured against, which I have so much respect for, of what's this person's story? Are they bringing up the sales side? It was about you talked about all the different kind of key core values of like innovation and technology. I also think about where you see a lot of core values around failing forward, connection, teamwork. How do they show up? Were they an athlete? Like, you're getting to understand, have they played in those ballparks before, by getting to understand their real story, which I think also helps in that invisible scorecard that these executives should be having, which I think is great.
To that end too, like, I also want to say, like, I don't think what we're endorsing here is like, a Coliseum gladiator type battle to the death. Like, that's not at all like what we're recommending. Like, don't put
nor was it, nor should it.
No, right? But like what we are saying though is like potentially using those moments, those times to sort out, like, how does that company, how do those people, how does that group show up when they think nobody's watching? Right?
Exactly.
Like, what is their character like? It reminds me of an expression that I don't need to put out your candle to make mine shine brighter. And I think that has a certain level of confidence in it. And what you're looking for in this evaluation, right, is, do they have confidence in who they are, what they do, and how impactful they can be in the relationship? Because if you are confident, it's okay to be different. If you're confident, it's also okay to not get selected. Like,
correct.
If you're there truly as a champion for the community that you serve, then your selection or lack thereof is based on alignment. And you should only want to be in those relationships that are aligned and mutually beneficial.
Yeah, whether selected or not. Exactly. Because I think that also, what this did for me at this dinner is it didn't just open up a relationship with who the prospect was. It opened up a relationship with the competitors and different friendships and different mutual. And there's now people that I'm excited to connect with because we have similarities that I never would have known about them if that dinner never happened. So there was a lot of things that dinner revealed, that a presentation, I'd never be sitting in a room with another competitor. However, I have heard stories where buyers will actually have every single vendor in the room and then they have to present in front of one another. So another totally crazy way
so
to
weird.
Right? Like different things I'm thinking, but it's like, that's all about the pitch deck. It's not about getting to know who the person was and, to your point, who the character was. And that's what I loved about stripping away anything from the sales and really getting to know the person was such an eye-opener for me that I love. You know me, I thrive on partnerships and networking and getting to know people and wanting to know who's the real you, not the fake you, in like a professional world. Like, let's dig in. So it makes it so I always come with my authentic self. So it was such an awesome experience to have that I think many people could do.
And something to consider too. So if you're going to go down this path, right, you're going to take this advice and you're going to go down this path of like kind of innovating your evaluation and expanding upon it. What I would say is this too, consider who it is that you're talking to in that moment. The vendor may very well provide all the solutions that you need. The individual you're talking to may not have the experience to be able to have that conversation with you. You might find yourself kind of running into shallow water, so to speak, if that individual doesn't have enough experience or exposure to the brand or enough confidence in what it is they're doing, or even maybe enough understanding of their pitch, right? Which, bad move on the brand's part. But if you find where you think that vendor is still the appropriate vendor for you, then you may want to go to another tier, right? You might be like,
Yes.
you know what? This person made the introduction. I appreciate the fact that they got me to this point. I now need to talk to a different individual in order to get a sense of like, in order to get these other components resolved, right? And I would say that like, because we're talking about this, because this is something new that you experienced and that I hadn't ever experienced, right? I would also say that like, if you all intend on hitting the spring conference season with this approach, be prepared that like the vendors probably aren't going to be like, you know, experienced in being able to navigate the space, but what a better environment to like identify the most honest sort of evaluation, right?
Yeah, because you can use it. So if I'm a buyer, we're going to the conference season. We know that there's a ton of different conferences that are coming up. You have the ability to now use that conference in a different way. Because you might go in and select a few vendors that you're looking at. Hey, what's a better opportunity than to get them at dinner or lunch and you just kind of have a social conversation? It's an informal setting. Might also tell you a lot about who's drinking the most or who might not be drinking the most, because we know there's all those happen at conferences.
Sure.
So cocktail hours can be dangerous.
Yeah.
I'm always a soda and lime drinker at any
That's
conference
it.
because you got to be smart about it, or one glass of wine over dinner. But it does allow you to realize who you are connecting with. So I think that these conferences, this is a really great way to evaluate the environment and the personal space of the vendors you're interested in a setting that isn't going to be typical in a boardroom. So you can have all of those different connections with all the competitors against one another, if you're the buyer, in the exact same room. And you can kind of have some fun with this.
And I think too, like to that point, I think that as a buyer, it's worth noting that you kind of need to prepare yourself with both an active and a passive evaluation mindset, right? Like in the active space, you're looking at those very specific like needs being met, the solution to the pain or the solution to the advancement of whatever the project is, right? So that is your active component, right? The active seeking of which of these vendors functionally can perform the thing that I want. And then from there, your passive evaluation, those are sort of like your opportunities to create tie breaks, right? So like if, as I mentioned in the opener, right, as you go pitch after pitch and deck after deck, they all start sort of feeling and looking the same. Now you can leverage to say, you know, where your confidence might lie, or maybe you can start to justify why there's maybe a difference in the cost or a difference in the service level. Like maybe they don't offer a particular, I don't know, nuance to the engagement, but they're also more entrenched or they have a deeper understanding of your industry or something. Maybe there's something like that that just overwhelmingly qualifies or pushes the tipping point, right? To where you're like, all right, I'm going to go with that vendor. I feel more confident in that space. And so,
Yes.
That active and passive, I think we need to be mindful of.
No, I definitely agree, because I mean, it also kind of opens up the door for different things. So like being where you're like, oh yeah, this is a vendor that I really trust. This is someone that I want to go to, where you also might have gone into the conference with having a vendor in mind, and you're at dinner and now they're revealing things that are like, oh wow, like that's a no shit moment. I gotta remove this one completely from my dating game.
Yeah.
They're out, because you never know. And when you have that, like the invisible scorecard in mind, you can really kind of identify that. Because I think the biggest piece is like something with, if I'm an executive, I think it's the executives who leave conferences with like real signal are those ones that walked in with that invisible scorecard in mind, because they're already doing their evaluation without you even knowing it if you're a vendor, which I think is excellent.
So let me ask you, like when you're in that setting, and because this is really more about the buyer segment versus the vendor segment. So as a buyer, when you're in that setting, is there a particular thing that happens that gives you almost overwhelming confidence?
From which perspective? From the vendor or from the buyer?
As the buyer.
As a buyer.
And I'll share with you mine, and then I'll give you like a second to kind of think about it. But so for me, and this is really tough, I'm looking for the advisor.
Yes.
And the reason why it's tough is because you need to know way more than what you're selling. And so like as I meet with a vendor, I want to be able to obviously identify whether or not you are a good fit for my organization or my need, or maybe I'm looking for someone else, right? Like maybe I'm simply shopping for another. I want you to be able to obviously respond to those things, but I also want you to have a level of understanding to the ecosystem that touches you, right? That is in the periphery of what it is that you do. So if I can't get beyond your service, that makes me more cautious, and it might not be fair, but it makes me more cautious. I want people who can be in the moment. I want people who could have a real conversation. I want people who can understand like beyond the fundamentals, right? And I want to be able to have like a more real conversation, a more advisory kind of discussion. So advisory or consultative selling, right? Like I want someone who can consult or advise in those moments. And it's hard to find. It's hard to find as an employer, right? But like,
no, exactly. I mean, I think that definitely resonates. I would say there's two more things that I would add to the advisory. It's one, I look for a vendor that does not bash another vendor. That's really important for me. If you start talking trash about someone else, you're immediately off my list.
Yeah.
And it's something that I keep in the back of my mind. I'm like, nope, they're gone. I just don't have respect for that.
It's a lack of confidence.
Completely. I have no respect for that at all. The other piece that I look for, similar to the advisory, but it's more the curiosity. Who's the one that is asking me questions to learn more, both personally and professionally, to get to understand what I'm looking for, who I am as a person. And so they can be able to provide the right solutions now and future state. So the ones that are curious, which kind of ties into that advisory side, they're able to help recommendations for down the road as well. That's really like probably the biggest pieces that I look at for sure.
That's fair.
And I love that.
That's fair. You know, I completely, again, you don't have to put out someone else's candle to make yours shine brighter. Like you're bright enough. You're bright enough. Awesome. All right. So how can we design better evaluation moments, right? So now we've got us to this point. We're at conferences. We've got obviously we could evaluate because a lot of people have all of their materials there, or they're prepared to share what it is they do for the market. But what can we do to advise like listeners that are heading to conferences or approaching conference season? What can they do differently in order to really optimize that moment while they're there?
There's a couple of things that I definitely recommend. Which we've talked about early on in one of our early podcasts around planning for conference season. But I think that one of the big things that I've got two here is one, kind of understand what you would be looking for if you're going through the vendor hall, right? But don't do the demo there.
Yeah.
Like if you're looking at a true vendor, request a meeting that's going to be outside of that hall. Get to know them. Say, hey, do you want to grab a drink at the bar? Like get to know them, because the demos and the getting into the weeds, the conference is not the time for that unless you actually...
It's overwhelming.
Yes, unless there is a truly designated time you guys have agreed to meet at and you're meeting within a suite or a meeting room. Then that's a different situation. But there should be no demos that are like your serious finalists that are going to be
right.
within the conference hall, like within the actual vendor hall. So that's one thing that I would recommend. What about you? What are some recommendations you have?
I like having different perspectives when I'm evaluating different things. It's not that I necessarily want to have to create a decision by some consortium or by some sort of cooperative group, because that just slows things down and you get too many chefs in the kitchen, right? It just doesn't tend to work well. But I do like having like unbiased third party and people who might be invested in me personally or invested in the company personally. Like someone who just has that care to show up for me in order to like hear the conversation, maybe pose a couple different questions or listen in, because you're going to miss stuff, right? There's going to be some other distraction that's going to happen. You're not going to catch or capture all the details. So I do like, whenever possible, trying to at least have a buddy, like a buddy system where I can go and evaluate.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. So like if you have someone, whether it's internal within your organization or another friend that is there, that's external that you trust and be like, hey man, can you just listen in? Can you give me, where am I feeling this? I think that's actually such a great recommendation. The other thing that I would definitely recommend is ask some of these vendors some different scenario questions. How do they think on their feet? What would they do in some risks and stuff? What would you do if XYZ happened, right? So getting them to think on their feet super quickly is going to be really, really key. And then I also, in doing that, I think about, do I trust what they just said or do I not trust what they just said? Are they giving me a line of bullshit or is this something that I think that they're actually going to be coming to the table with and they will do what they say, which I think is key.
You know what could be really, really good for that is like, and I don't overcomplicate this, but like a simple rubric.
Yeah.
Like you might evaluate people, let's say on three different areas, right? The technical alignment to your solution, the available resources to get additional information, and trust. Let's say that those were the three. And then from there, it's just a scale of 1 to 5, right? Don't get crazy. But now if you've got your list, whether you're using, Evernote or OneNote or something in your phone, or if you've got a piece of paper and a pen, you're going old school with an analog, like whatever it is, it's fine. But like, jotting that note when you've left the conversation, I think provides you a moment of clarity that you could now go back to and reassess. So if I was looking at multiple calling solutions, in which case, those obviously appear in a lot of these conferences for staffing anyway. But if I was going to evaluate calling solutions or ATSs or CRMs or automation tools or whatever, if I'm going to hit multiple of them, then I should evaluate them all sort of the same way. What is the technical piece? Does it line up with what I need? What is their ability to sort of serve me in terms of resources? And then that trust factor. And I think if you were to outline all of that, then you could go back home and drop it into AI and help it evaluate all these things. And you can give it your own scoring, which starts to remove a lot of your own bias.
You said something. You said, don't get crazy. And it immediately, for those of you that remember Mad TV, you know where I'm going with this, Jeff. It immediately reminded me of Bon Qui Qui and welcome to King Burger. Well, we'll do it your way, but don't get crazy. And Bon Qui Qui does not want a complicated order because you know what happens when we have a complicated order. It doesn't go well. So I'm so with you because if you can make it simple, take it back, and then really kind of use AI to help you. I think that's key. Because really, honestly, the best evaluation tool isn't going to be the RFP. It's truly about the human interaction and the interactions that are going to create purpose for you and understanding, can you trust them? Is this going to be the longer term? Okay, Jeff, I have a question for you because we do have conference season coming up like incredibly quickly. Next week here, I think there's like some different conferences that are popping up. So if someone's walking into conferences essentially next week, what do you think is one thing that they need to do differently right now? From a buyer
Yeah. I'm going to say the one thing, because nobody's walking into conferences with a rubric.
Yeah.
Nobody has a scoring system for what it is that they're evaluating. Nobody. They're going to go in, they're going to talk to people, they're going to get a gut check, they're going to feel good because, let's be honest, salespeople, that's their job. Their job is to make them feel good about the decisions that they have in front of them and the fact that they're the solution. They're going to go in, they're going to get sold, they're going to walk away, and they wouldn't have done any of this other fact finding. They would have gotten none of it. So I think if there's, in fact, I'll just give two, right? So one is come up with a simple scoring mechanism that allows you to evaluate these things.
Your invisible scorecard.
Yep. And then the second is, when you get into those discussions, like, so let's say out of the sea of vendors, you've got it sort of secured down to 2, 3, whatever the number is. I would make it a point to connect with them outside of the vendor area.
Personally.
So like whether it's at a lunch, whether it's at breakfast, whether it's during coffee, if they have an after hours thing, like I would take a moment to interact with them in a less formal setting in order to maybe try to gather some of this like soft alignment. So those are the two things that I think that people can do now to prepare even for as fast as next week.
I think that's great. And if you are a buyer going into a conference this next week or any of the conferences, and you've already been in a selection process and you know that your final 2 vendors are there, hey, I highly recommend inviting them to dinner.
Why not?
See who is going to be the one that comes personally. See who the human really is. Make it intentional. And the ones that are going to be selling you at that dinner are probably not the ones that you want to be working with. It's about getting into the personal connection and do they align? I think that was something I have totally going to walk away from because it just created a whole new relationship and experience for me. And if you don't have vendors that you've selected, but you're going in and you're looking at several different vendors for a specific need within your organization, then go in definitely to Jeff, to your point, like make the personal connection, see if they want to go for a cocktail, get to know them because that's going to tell you so much more about the person than sitting at a vendor booth and them doing a demo. I think that's going to be, it's all about that personal side. I think will really help.
And if you get that time, here's the thing is like, if you were able to secure that time, like to your dinner conversation, right? To the dinner sort of event that took place. Like, look, I don't necessarily need people to like gush and open up to me about all their personal life, but like, I want to have conversations that aren't necessarily about your product, you know? So I think that may be kind of the goal. And I think that's a pretty easy benchmark to hit.
Agreed.
So like, it isn't about whether or not the two of you have a commonality in sports or the two of you like going to the same destination it's not that. It's having a conversation that is not product focused. And I think as you have a conversation with these people that is not product focused, it could be industry focused, it could be market focused, it could be like just current events focused, but just get away from the product. And if they don't have the ability to do that, then I would say that individual is either the wrong person to figure out whether or not the company has the soft alignment that you're looking for, or maybe the company just doesn't have the soft alignment you're looking for.
Yeah, because your scorecard should really be about not the vendor that's like more impressive. It's about the vendor that feels the right fit for your company completely.
This was awesome. So look, I mean, if you're heading to conference season with a vendor evaluation on your plate, use the environment. Go in with the Invisible Scorecard. Design at least one moment that gets past the pitch. You'll learn more at one dinner conversation than 3 formal presentations. I guarantee it. If this episode shifted how you think about your next selection process, share with someone who's also got maybe some vendor meetings coming up. I'm sure they're going to thank you for it.
I appreciate all of you guys. And to Jeff's point, don't be bon qui. Let's not get crazy. And your vendor should not be like a dating game, swiping left, swiping right. Get to know them even more. Don't judge them just on their picture and profile. And thank you, everyone, for listening to Highly Adaptive. We will see you next week with another great conversation built for leaders and change makers. And until then, let's go beyond the pitch.
Big thanks to Allied Insight, not just our sponsor, but an industry leader and preferred marketing partner to staffing and consulting businesses nationwide. If your firm is looking for expert-level support that goes beyond the logo, you know where to go, alliedinsight.com. If this episode helped you, share it with your friends and colleagues and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. While you're there, consider leaving us a review, and when you're ready for more industry insights, articles, case studies, and more, find it on allthingsstaffing.com. This episode was produced and edited by Allied Insight, and the music provided by Home Music Stock. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.